Welcome back. I'm coming to you from the fort again, and I have my camp light again, and I am ready to read from Dragon Masters again. Are you guys ready? All right, let's pick up with chapter 10. Worm's Story. Drake stepped inside Worm's dark cave. Worm opened one eye. I need to shine your scales, Drake said. He was carrying a brush, a basket, and towels. Drake looked at Worm's brown scales. They're not shiny, he said, but I'll clean them anyway. Drake was still getting used to being around Worm. The dragon's head was so big, it was as big as Drake. Worm could swallow Drake in one gulp if he wanted, but something about Worm made Drake feel peaceful. Drake gently brushed one of Worm's scales. The big dragon made a sound low in his throat. Worm smiled and he closed his eyes. I think that might have been kind of like petting him, so he liked that. You like that? Drake asked. Worm made another purring sound. Good. He cleaned Worm's scales one at a time. I kind of miss the onion field back home, Drake said to his dragon. It was hard work, but I loved being outside. Drake started to clean Worm's head. And I really miss my family, Drake said. He scratched behind Worm's head and his ears, like he did with his cat back home. Then he felt his hand start tingling. He tried to take his hand off Worm, but he couldn't. It was stuck. Drake's eyes widened. He looked at Worm, and the dragon was staring very hard at him. Pictures popped into Drake's head. He saw the cave from his nightmare, and he saw the explosion again. And before, Drake had woken up, but this time the pictures just kept coming. Worm was trying to get out of the cave, but the other dragons were in the way. Then soldiers rushed into the cave. Each soldier's shirt had a gold dragon sewn on it. The king's soldiers, Drake replied. The soldiers wrapped Worm in chains. They dragged him out of the cave. Oh! Drake could hear Worm's cry. Then his hand stopped tingling, and the pictures left his head. Drake looked at Worm. Did that really happen? Did the king's men take you away from your family? Just like they took me away from mine. I'm so sorry, Drake said, and he threw his arms around Worm's neck, and Worm closed his eyes. All his life, Drake had looked up to King Roland, but why would the king's men treat Worm like a prisoner? Oh my, maybe he isn't such a good king after all. Chapter 11. A Noise in the Night. Good job cleaning Worm's scales, Drake, Griffith said, walking into the cave. Drake wasn't going to say anything about what Worm had shown him. Not yet. But he did have a question for Griffith. How did the dragons get here? He asked. The king's soldiers searched far and wide, Griffith replied. It is not easy to find a dragon. Most people have never seen one. But the king did not give up. His soldiers were able to capture these 4. But did the dragons want to come here? Asked Drake. The king does not always think about what the dragons want, Griffin said darkly. Now come. It is time for your supper. After they ate, Bo and Drake went to their room, and Bo was teaching him how to write the alphabet. Bo drew a capital D and a lowercase d. See, Bo said, the big D looks like a dragon with a big belly, and he drew a picture on the paper. Like Vulcan, Drake said, with a laugh. Bo laughed too. Moonlight glinted off Bo's dragonstone. It reminded Drake of something he'd wanted to ask Bo about. Does your stone ever glow? Drake asked. Bo shook his head. No, why do you ask? It's just, I thought I saw mine glow once, Drake said, but I was with Worm, so that's interesting, Bo said. You should tell Griffith. Drake nodded. Tomorrow I will. Drake wrote rows of the letter D before he went to sleep. He thought he would dream of D's, or maybe of Worm again. But just after he climbed into bed, thump, Drake heard a loud noise. He sat up and saw two figures standing by Bo's bed. Ooh, chapter 12. A sneaky plan. The two figures turned around. It was Rory and Anna. What do you want? Drake asked. Go back to sleep, Rory snapped. Why should I? He snapped back. Drake was tired of Rory being so bossy. Yeah, why should he? Bo said. And why are you two here? Anna spoke up. We are going to bring our dragons outside while the rest of the castle is asleep. Do you guys want to come? You can bring Worm and Shoe. This is a bad idea, Bo said. No, it's not, Rory said. We're dragon masters, and we should be able to take our dragons out whenever we want to. You do have a point, Drake agreed, and I do think Worm would like to go outside again. Bo looked worried. What if Griffith finds out? He asked. What if the king finds out? They won't find out, Rory said, so long as neither of you say anything. She looked them both in the eyes. Well, come on then, said Anna. Drake slipped on his shoes, and he followed the others down the hall. The door to Griffith's room was open, and he was snoring loudly. Zzz. Rory put a finger to her lips. As they tiptoed past the door. Drake peeked inside. The wizard's long beard flew up every time he snored. The dragon masters walked down the stairs, and the guard in the front of the training room door was asleep too. That's Simon, Rory whispered. He always falls asleep. They tiptoed past Simon and into the training room. The torches were not lit, so the room was very dark and very black. Rory lit a candle. Then she passed candles to each of them. Now let's go get the dragon, she said, still whispering. She reached Vulcan's cave first. Rory opened the gate. Wake up, Vulcan, she said. We're going outside. Grumbling, Vulcan got to his feet. Anna and Bo woke up their dragons, and Drake went into Worm's cave. Worm, do you want to go outside? Drake asked. Worm lifted his head. His eyes shot wide open, and they stared right at Drake. Drake got a very strange feeling. Come on, Worm, Drake said. But Worm didn't move. He just stared at Drake. Is he trying to tell me something? Drake wondered. Rory, Anna, and Bo walked up to Worm's cave with their dragons. Is Worm coming? Rory asked. Suddenly Drake froze. He heard words inside his head. Do not go into the tunnel. Wow. Chapter 13. Trouble in the Tunnel. Did Worm just speak to me? Through his thoughts? Drake did not know what to think, but he had a feeling those words of warning had come from Worm. Drake, what's the matter? Anna asked. I'm not sure, he said. What would they think if I told them I just heard words in my head? Worm doesn't want to go. Fine, stay here. Be a big chicken, Rory snapped. I didn't say I was staying, Drake shot back. I'll come along without Worm. As soon as he said it, Worm crawled out of the cave. Look, he's coming with us, Anna said. Drake didn't hear any more words in his head. Maybe Worm had changed his mind. Rory led Vulcan forward. Let's get moving. They headed into the long tunnel that led outside. The torches on the walls weren't lit, and their candles weren't doing much to light the way. Kepri can light the way, Anna said. But before she could give the command, Rory cried out, Look! Drake craned his neck to look around the dragons in front of him. Then he saw it. A glowing red orb floated toward them. It grew bigger and bigger as it got closer. That looks like wizard's magic, Anna cried. But it's not Griffith's magic, said Bo. It feels scary. And then Vulcan let out a loud roar. His big tail thrashed back and forth. Calm down, Vulcan, Rory yelled, but her dragon was very upset. Whack! Whack! Vulcan's tall tail banged against the sides of the tunnel, and his big body slammed against the walls. Kepri and Shu cried out. They both tried to turn back. Only Worm stayed calm. The tunnel began to shake, and dirt fell from the walls. The dragon masters all looked at one another. Run! Drake yelled. Run! But it was too late. The walls caved in around them. Oh my! This has been a very frightening chapter, hasn't it? All right, I will see you tomorrow for the next reading.